My name is Zev Tiefenbach, and my collection of work is called The Wildfire That Begat Suburbia. I have a series of 36 by 36 lightboxes, and they're taken in 2007 in a community called Southridge, which is a development around Kelowna. They were taken about 4 years after the 2003 Okanagan Mountain fire. And what I'm looking at in this collection of images is the relationship between a natural disaster and the development. And I'm really curious to see how societally Kelowna embraces development and uses the opportunity of a natural disaster to re-envision itself and to expand and to create this sort of suburb and extend their suburbia into the wilderness. It's part of my general practice of photographing geographies of interest. And when I'm photographing geographies, I'm generally interested in the relationship between the geography and the society. What do we learn about the society from the way that we live on the geography? So what I do is, as I travel anywhere, I'm always scouting an area or a region or a place, and I'll make a mental note and say, okay, I got to get back to this place. But so specifically with this collection, it's a great question. My cousin Cindy and Brad bought a lot in this neighborhood, and they built a spec home in the neighborhood, and we went up there for Easter lunch or something like that at one point, and I was just amazed to see this perfectly suburban little home, or large home, that they built in the suburb, and their backyard was these charred trees. And the contrast was so startling to me that I kind of made a mental note, okay, I've got to get back to this spot. At the time I lived in Lake Country, so it wasn't a big trek, but I had a mental note, okay, I got to go back to this spot and see what's going on. And so this was a time when everybody was speculating in Kelowna in 2007 around property. People were quitting their jobs and buying a lot and trying to put up a house just before a big crash. And so this sort of idea, and a lot of the shots are really indicative of that, with the survey posts and so on, of this sort of almost what I would call a religious zeal about development in Kelowna at that time. I view Kelowna and the West here in general, Salmon no different, or Kamloops, as a bit of a frontier. We're on the western frontier, and I moved here from Montreal in about 2006, and what I found really, really remarkable about moving here was culturally how much people talked about property, how much people talked about lots and what they could speculate on and where there were good lots. And people really viewed land as far as these little chunks of pieces that you could kind of grab and try to convert into something else. And that was really interesting to me. Combined with the wildfire and this sort of zeal of development and so on, I think that this little series here is really indicative of a mindset and a way of life that's that feels really authentic to the Kelowna and Okanagan experience. When I go back to a community to photograph it, it's usually an aesthetic idea first and foremost that's motivating me and pushing me back to that location. So those charred trees against a blue sky with these kind of developmental colors, that kind of contrast of shape and texture and color was really, really important to me. And my practice is kind of based in setting myself in a location and then exploring the location. So as I'm exploring the location, I'm exploring it aesthetically, but intrinsic to that is an exploration of the political and social fabric that I'm photographing. And every time I've changed my habit of transportation, I've had to change my habit of photographing. At one time, I didn't have a car, and I would travel by hitchhiking, and I'd have a lot of camera gear on me, and it put me really, really close to the road all the time. And basically, every time I get dropped off, I'd take the opportunity to photograph wherever the heck I ended up, and then get back on the road and photograph more. And then as I shifted to, I lived in an urban center, so I could ride my bicycle to a neighborhood, lock up the bicycle, walk around that neighborhood, or take the metro in Montreal to an area that I'd never been to, explore and photograph on foot. Now I live in a really rural, spread out area, so everything I do is by car. So sometimes I'll just pull over on the side of the road and be like, okay, this is a shot. I'll scout it out. I'll know, okay, at one point when the light's right, I need to stop here between Salmon Arm and Grandview Bench. There's this great shot that I need to get. But when and where I can, I really do like to park the car, get out on my feet, and the walking process really, really to me is the most ideal. Walking and art is a whole practice that I think a lot of people have written about and talk about. And some of my series like this, these geographic surveys, I really, the route that I've taken is important and helps me process. And the act of slowing down and walking and really helps with the process of seeing. I think that I'm always looking and I'm always challenging myself to be prepared to photograph when the moment occurs, and that's hard because when I'm driving from A to B, I'm always making mental notes if I can't stop about where I would stop, and I want to be as opportunistic as I can to convert those moments into the photographs that I take. This series here is shot on medium format film. The film stock that I used was 400 NPH, which is now called 400N. It's a Fuji film, and it was shot. The camera that I use is a Hasselblad, which is a common 120 6x6 format frame, square format. And then what I am interested in at the end of the day are the objects. How do these images and this proliferation of images that I create become objects is my preoccupation. Obviously out of Vancouver, there's a great tradition of lightboxes, Rodney Graham or Jeff Wall, and so there's a lot of exposure to the lightboxes, so in of itself it's an appealing medium. But what I wanted to do with these lightboxes was to have something also that really felt like they were representing what the images were of, and there's a lot of sky in them. I feel like I was really trying to create with this body of work, there's a religiosity to the zeal of the development and the sky and the landscape that I wanted to reference, and I think that the backlit nature of the boxes really, really plays into that really nicely. I also wanted a lot of depth. At the time I made these boxes, LEDs were really, really popular. Now they're pervasive, but at the time everyone said, no, if you're gonna make light boxes, you have to use LEDs because then you get these really, really thin boxes. The LEDs are cheap, they last forever. And I was really, really attracted to having a lot of depth with these boxes, a lot more wood, and I wanted the wood black. Originally my thought was to char, to burn the wood so that they really resonated with the forest fire. In the end that was just too cumbersome and didn't work out well, but just painting the wood black and having it feel rustic really gave me that feeling of the forest fire that's there, where it came from, and made the materiality connect. So it's really fun to show in the Salmon Arm Art Center. It's when I first moved to the area back in 2010, one of the first places I came to was the Salmon Arm Art Center, and kind of a little giddy, and there's a little art gallery in town, and I picked up the application, the exhibition application, and thought, one day I'd love to be able to show here. So it's really neat. It's really neat that our community has a place that's committed and devoted to the arts and gives us, a certain amount of home and space for our endeavors and our practices. So it's really, really lovely to be able to show here, and I think it's very meaningful that our community has this sort of epicenter for us to be able to work out of and show our creativity and our innovation and do what we do as artists and have a place in society for it. And I think that in the health of any community, I I think can be measured by how much of a home the artist community has in their local art galleries. And I know that the team here in Salmon Arm has been so committed to not just showing the work, but cultivating artists, recruiting artists, and always creating conversation between artists to sort of further not just the interests of the artist, but to understand and try to define the constantly evolving nature of what is art. So it's great to be able to be part of that conversation, and it's great to be in what is for me a natural home here in the community. So it's very validating, and it's also, I think, very significant that a community has a place like this for the art community.